Hello, Warlocks. It is your turn for the exotic tier list, and we'll be doing it the same way we did the Titan tier list. We're going to talk about the new exotics and then what I think the best exotics are for each subclass and activity. Let's start with Forsaken with the Geomag Stabilizers. These extend the duration of your Chaos Reach when dealing damage with it, and sprinting when it's close to being ready will give you a boost of super energy. There's not really too much to say about this exotic other than if you're using Chaos Reach, then you use this exotic. That's it. Chaos Reach is a perfectly acceptable super to be using right now. It's pretty good. Therefore, Geomags are good. If Chaos Reach ever becomes really bad for some reason, or if Storm Trance gets a buff, or if other supers get buffed to the point where Chaos Reach becomes irrelevant, then this exotic will be bad. It is directly tied to the quality of Chaos Reach in the meta, both PvE and PvP, at any given moment. Right now, it's fine, so you can use them. Chromatic Fire gives your kinetic weapon kills a Dragonfly perk effect based on the subclass that you are using. Are explosions fun? Yes, there's no disputing that. Is something like Dragonfly widely regarded as a top tier perk? It's in the upper half, I would say, but it's definitely not a game changer. This is mostly going to be a fun exotic for messing around in patrols or lost sectors or the Heroic Strike playlist or other low effort needed content. But in terms of impact, in terms of higher difficulty content, if you need every inch that you can get, these robes are probably not going to be on the list. Phoenix Protocol is where kills and assists in a Well of Radiance give bonus super energy towards your next Well of Radiance. This is almost the same situation as Geomag Stabilizers. It all depends on how strong Well of Radiance is in the meta right now. That being said, there aren't many times in PvE where you need to be chaining Wells of Radiance. But if you can, why not? If you're doing strikes, the only time you probably need to use a well is at the very end of a strike or in select mid-sections where there happens to be a lot of action. Although I will say for 100k or very high score Nightfalls, where you have those longer than average engagements, this thing can really shine as long as you're getting kills. In easier content, you're probably going to be dropping wells and then just moving on to the next section really quickly, especially with the team, so you'd really need to get as much energy as possible in a really short time. Otherwise, you're just going to drop a well, things are going to die in 5 seconds, and then you're just going to be gone. In the raid, you only need wells really during damage phases, which are times where you're not killing stuff, which means you don't really need to use Phoenix Protocol. At the same time, at the rate that you can get a Well of Radiance back using this, it certainly doesn't hurt you to use this either. And if you're a Dawnblade, you don't really have an over-the-top amazing exotic to use anyway. However, I don't know if this is intended or not, but if you are in someone else's Well of Radiance and you have Phoenix Protocol on, and you use a different super, the super energy effect will still apply to you while you're in the super. So that's cool, but is it actually good? It's not too bad, but it requires some extra setup, and I think this really only works well in blind well-like situations where you have tons of enemies or any other wave-based activity where you can actually stack energy for a long time. But even then, it's a cool little novelty, but it's not super crazy. Contraverse Hold gives a large damage resistance when charging handheld supernovas, and also other charged grenades, but let's be real here, and you get a random amount of grenade energy back on hit. If you're a connoisseur of handheld supernova in PvP, this is probably right up your alley. Combined with some grenade mods and armor perks, you too can be that guy in PvP who only walks around with a charged grenade, ready to infuriate anyone who comes within 15 feet of you. But this is an exotic that you need to play around. It is a playstyle defining exotic. If you don't abuse handheld supernovas, if you don't abuse charged grenades, it will be a waste. But if you do, it is a very powerful PvP tool. I feel like most people who are going to be equipping these gloves are very aware of its effect. In PvE, only in the briefest of moments will you be utilizing the damage resistance, and if I'm using any sort of charged grenade, it's probably going to be Devour, which gets you your health back anyway, potentially negating the need for damage resistance. The bonus grenade energy is nice, but with it being random, that leads to inconsistency. This is much more of a defensive exotic than offensive, but its defensive capabilities are not strong enough, to me, to really care that much. Any defensive exotics need to be very, very strong for me to consider them. Much like Titans, Warlocks got treated pretty well in Forsaken with their new exotics, but what about the best per subclass and the best neutrals? Well, for Voidwalker Warlocks in PvE, I think it's still probably Nezarec Sin, which technically isn't even locked to Voidwalkers, it's just more beneficial when you're all voided out, or Skull of Dire Ahamkara with the buffs that it got, which gets you super energy back on Nova Bomb kills. Skull of Dire Ahamkara got buffed a little while back, where energy now scales based on the difficulty of the enemies that you kill. Didn't used to do that. And it just gives more energy in general. Nova Bomb isn't really super meta right now anywhere, especially not PvP, but that doesn't mean that the ability got worse in any way. It's still a pretty good super. As we just discussed, Contraverse Hold is decent, but in PvE, it doesn't have as much value as a defensive exotic. I'd rather have Nez or Skull or a neutral exotic. Nezarec's Sin's effect of increased energy can now build up to a maximum of 20 seconds instead of just ticking down from 2 seconds and never being able to be refreshed, which makes it far easier to utilize, and you can chain kills together instead of having to pace yourself to make sure that you got the buff to refresh every single kill. For Dawnblade Warlocks in PvE, dare I say Sunbracers are potentially your top option as an overall pick. You have Phoenix Protocol and Wings of Sacred Dawn, which can be good in the proper build, but you really need to build around it, and being in the air perfectly still isn't always great, and it's much harder to do all of that on console. Sunbracers are very simple. Longer solar grenade duration and solar melee kills allow you to spam grenades everywhere. Stacking some melee mods or perks can really amp up your firepower, but it's not really an exotic that you need to worry about all the time, like Wings of Sacred Dawn or something like Heart of Inmost Light. Sure, you can stack some melee and grenade mods and perks to make things happen a little bit quicker, but Sunbracers give you a nice mix of ability gameplay and then just going back to shooting, instead of having to worry about interweaving ability and gunplay back and forth very rapidly. Phoenix Protocol is better in certain situations, but Sunbracers work with every spec of Dawnblade, which is why I give it the title. Even if I think Protocol has a bit of a stronger effect, I don't really know which way to judge it. For Stormcaller Warlocks in PvE, it's still Crown of Tempests, or now Geomag Stabilizers if you're running Chaos Reach. I really like Crown of Tempest because I have to build and play around it, which makes me more aware of my cooldowns, proper stacking of buffs, timing of abilities. I enjoy that because it shows in my gameplay. I'm throwing more abilities, I'm getting more kills. It makes gameplay more than just shooting a gun. It's about how I can optimize my killing power. I realize this is in complete contrast to Sunbracers, which doesn't have that rapid fire back and forth, but some people aren't looking to micromanage their cooldowns as much as I am. Not to mention that it's basically the only Stormcaller specific exotic in the game other than Geomags, so you don't really have much of a choice. As for neutral options, there are a lot of them, seemingly revolving around Rift play. However, Ophidian Aspect, to me, still remains towards the top. Although with the introduction of armor perks in Forsaken, its value can drop slightly because you can just get perks from armor now. The appeal of Ophidian Aspect is that it works with everything though. Weapons, ready, and reload quickly. It's a catch-all, it's completely passive. Claws of Ahamkara are another catch-all exotic, just another melee attack. There's not a whole lot to build around them. They're solid, but not very interesting. Lunafaction Boots are definitely the best group PvE exotic, hands down, especially with the introduction of Thunderlord back into Destiny, and I would say that you should probably have them on in most high-level group activities. but the lower in difficulty you go, the less I really think you need them. So, should you use them in the raid? Absolutely. 5 out of 5 in the raid. They're amazing. Nightfall? Yeah, sure. You know, not too bad, depending on the difficulty. Regular 500 power strikes? Maybe you don't really need them as much. And anything below strikes, unless you're doing something really specific, I don't think you need them. I think it's overkill at that point. Is Ophidian Aspect better than the stuff just mentioned? Nez Sin, Phoenix Protocol, Crown of Tempests? I would say that they're on par, almost equals, but it's a person-by-person judgment call. It depends on your subclass, your weapons, your playstyle, and all of that. In PvP for Voidwalker Warlocks, if there were a Nova Warp exotic, it would be that, but it doesn't exist. So if you're a handheld supernova kind of player, then Contraverse Hold is probably the play. Of course, Nezarec Sin, if you're using all Void, has some potential too, but Contraverse seems more effective when stacked up with grenade mods. For Dawnblade Warlocks, again, there isn't really a Dawnblade super ability specific exotic in the game, and if it existed, it would likely be the option. Warlocks are much more subclass neutral exotic oriented when it comes to PvP. If you wanted to break out Sunbracers, that would be fine, but I don't think they're over the top good. For Stormcallers, I think Crown of Tempests is better than Geomags because Crown gives you a benefit throughout the match, not just when you're using your super. Chaos Reach tends to be hit or miss in PvP, so while you could use Geomags, I don't think they're that crucial to the experience. I think Crown of Tempests gives a much better overall experience. So, let's talk about all of those neutral exotics. Ophidian Aspect, Karnstein Armlets, the Stag, Eye of Another World, Apotheosis Veil, Claws of Ahamkara, Transversive Steps. All of these are very solid exotics. Me, personally, after going back and playing with all those things again, Ophidian and Transversive Steps are my picks, with Karnstein's also being pretty solid. I am all about uptime, health regen, reload speed. Anything that increases my uptime fighting people is gonna be really good in my book. Ophidian lets you ready and reload everything super fast. Karnstein's give you health regen after a melee-based win, and Transversives, while not as uptime oriented, just felt really nice to play with my playstyle. The Stag, I think, is a fun choice because it gives you a lot of Rift uptime, which means more healing, which means more action, plus dropping a Rift on death can be beneficial to teammates, buffed in Forsaken to now be full duration. It's not just a little 5-second rinky-dink kind of thing. Eye of Another World is a completely passive exotic for those who don't want to think about anything at all and just want ability energy, buffed in Forsaken as well. Apotheosis Veil is good for emergency activations of a super. Me personally, I'm not into panic supers too much, especially as a Warlock. It's a very situational effect. I've been pretty unenthused by Transversive Steps historically, but after playing with them a bunch recently, I've warmed up to them a lot. I can feel the increased speed, the increased slide distance, and the auto-reloading of a shotgun is really handy if you don't have any reload speed bonuses. So, Ophidian Aspect, Karnstein's, and Transversive Steps would be my picks for PvP overall. Then we have the rest, everything not mentioned. Verity's Brow, giving grenade energy boost to your team on energy weapon kills. It's a decent effect. You can combine this with something like Risk Runner to really pump out grenade energy, but I just kind of think it's outclassed right now. That's a pretty niche effect. Aeon Soul, yeah, again, interesting concept. Didn't really work out. The effect on Winter's Guile, melee damage increases melee damage, is actually really potent, and you can stack that with Devour, and that will lead to you being an unstoppable melee murder machine. Is that fun? Yeah. Is it necessary or more beneficial than other stuff that you could be doing? Probably not. Sanguine Alchemy is also pretty potent on paper, allowing for wall hacks when standing in a rift. Most rifts are used defensively as well, so you would think you would see more use out of this. It used to get a lot of use in competitive, back when competitive did not have radar, but now it has radar, and I think most people just don't like standing still in a rift waiting for targets to roam around when they can just use their radar. Starfire Protocol gives you an extra fusion grenade. They recharge from empowered weapon damage, not even kills, and fusion kills give rift energy. So this is supposed to be a constant cycle of rift, grenade, gun, rift, grenade. It sounds very powerful until you realize that for the most part, you can just shoot stuff and get the same effect without having to deal with all of the extra animations. You don't need rift spam in average moment-to-moment gameplay. Vesper of Radius gives an arc shockwave effect when you drop a rift, and gives more rift energy when you are surrounded. Last time I tested the shockwave, it was not very strong, and it pretty much still is the same effect. This is a defensive exotic meant to push enemies away to create a space for yourself, but against anything actually threatening, you're probably just gonna die if there are that many things around you anyway. Rift energy when surrounded is not terrible, but just not strong enough. Warlocks, that is your exotic review, tier list sort of deal. Hunters, you guys are up next. If you enjoyed this video, a positive rating is appreciated. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.